The night air was cool and quiet as Keanu Reeves walked slowly down the city street, his thoughts heavy but calm. This evening wasn't supposed to be extraordinary. In fact, he hoped for a simple night, a quiet meal in the very restaurant he had dreamed about for years. A place he had built carefully and lovingly, a place meant to welcome everyone no matter who they were. Haven was more than just a restaurant for Keanu. It was a reflection of values that mattered deeply to him: kindness, respect, humility, and warmth. It was a place he wished had existed during his lonelier days, a place where anyone could sit and feel at home. Tonight, Keanu wanted no cameras, no fanfare, no reserved corner table under a spotlight. He wore a plain coat, comfortable jeans, and walked up to the door like any guest would. In his heart, he believed this quiet visit would confirm that Haven was living up to the dream he had carried for so long. But what happened next would hurt. More than he could have expected. A tall doorman in a sharp black suit stood at the entrance, holding a list and watching people carefully. His face was serious, almost impatient. Without hesitation, Keanu approached gently, his voice low and kind. "Good evening," he said softly. "Is there room for one tonight?" "No reservation, I'm afraid." The doorman didn't lift his head fully, his tone dismissive and cold. "Sorry, sir, we are completely full tonight. No reservation means no table." His words felt like a door slamming shut. Keanu smiled politely, stepping aside without protest. His heart felt a quiet ache, not because he had been denied a seat, but because he realized in that instant that the place meant to welcome everyone had become just like every other exclusive impersonal restaurant in the city. Instead of leaving, he found a shadowed corner nearby and stood quietly. He watched as more guests arrived, eager to see how others would be treated. A few moments later, an elderly man slowly approached the door. His thin coat hung loosely on his shoulders, his shoes worn down by time. He carried an old envelope, carefully tucked under his arm. When he spoke, his voice trembled slightly but carried hope. "Good evening," the old man said gently. "I don't have a reservation, but I heard this was a place where everyone could feel welcome. Could I have a small table, please?" The doorman didn't even pause to consider. "We are full, sir," he said flatly. "Please come back another night." The old man's face fell. He nodded quietly, turning away with a heavy sigh, as if all the air had left his lungs. Keanu felt a twist deep in his chest, the kind of ache that comes not from pride, but from witnessing quiet injustice. This wasn't Haven. This wasn't the place he had dreamed about. Haven was supposed to embrace everyone, especially people like this man who might have nowhere else to go. But then, something else caught Keanu's attention. A sleek sports car pulled up to the curb. Two young influencers stepped out, laughing loudly, their phones already out, recording themselves as they approached the entrance. Keanu overheard them casually tell the doorman they didn't have a reservation either, but the moment they smiled, the doorman's entire posture changed. He became welcoming, warm, deferential. "Good evening. Of course we have space for you," he said, stepping aside with a wide smile. "Come right in." Keanu's heart sank further. He could no longer ignore what he was seeing. This was favoritism, plain and painful. Haven, a place born from kindness, was now bending to appearances, turning away the humble and poor while welcoming the glamorous and wealthy. Before doing anything, Keanu quietly followed the elderly man down the sidewalk. After a few steps, he gently placed a hand on the man's shoulder. "May I walk with you?" he asked softly. The old man turned, surprised but smiling faintly. "Yes, please." They walked together in silence for a while. Then Keanu spoke again, his voice warm. "What brought you here tonight?" The man paused before answering. "Someone told me that Haven was different," he said. "That it was a place where it didn't matter who you were, rich or poor, old or young. They said I'd feel welcome here. I believed them. I don't go out much these days." But I believed. This place was special. Those simple words hit Keanu like a stone in the chest. The old man's belief, his quiet hope, had been crushed at his own door. After a long moment, the old man tilted his head slightly, studying Keanu's face. Then his eyes widened in recognition. Wait. You're Keanu Reeves, he whispered. You. This is your restaurant? Keanu nodded quietly. Yes, it is. The old man's face filled with gentle shock and kindness. I'm so sorry, I didn't realize. But it doesn't matter who I am. It's the kindness that matters. Keanu smiled sadly. You're right. That's exactly what I hoped this place would be. But tonight, tonight, it failed you. And that's on me. He turned back toward Haven, determination rising inside him. He couldn't just walk away from this. He couldn't allow this place to forget its soul. When he reached the entrance again, Maria, the head chef and one of the first people he had hired, spotted him through the window. She rushed out quickly, her apron still tied around her waist. Mr. Reeves, she said breathlessly, I didn't know you were coming tonight. The doorman turned pale, realization slowly creeping across his face. His mouth opened slightly, but he couldn't find any words. Keanu's voice remained gentle, but now it carried a quiet strength that could not be ignored. Maria, may I speak with you and the staff right now, please? It's important. Maria nodded quickly, sensing the weight of the moment. Yes, of course. Keanu stepped through the doors, pausing only to look back and gesture kindly to the old man. Please come with me, he said softly. The old man hesitated at first, but then followed him inside. The restaurant, warm and softly lit, had a quiet hum of conversation. But as Keanu walked through the dining room, people began to notice. Whispers spread quickly, eyes turned toward him. They all recognized him now, the humble star, the owner of this very place. Keanu gathered the entire staff near the bar, Maria at his side. He looked around at them all, not with anger, but with deep sadness and honesty. This restaurant was never supposed to be about appearances, he said slowly, his voice soft but clear. It was built to welcome everyone, to be a place where no one felt invisible or small. His gaze swept the room gently, settling finally on the doorman, who lowered his head in shame. Tonight, Keanu continued, I watched people being treated differently based only on how they looked, based only on whether they appeared wealthy or famous. The entire dining room was now silent. Even the guests who had come for fine food and celebrity sightings listened intently, their meals forgotten. This cannot continue, Keanu said quietly, and then something beautiful happened. One man stood from his table and began clapping slowly, softly. Then another diner joined him, then another. Soon, the entire restaurant was filled with gentle, heartfelt applause, not for fame, but for the honesty they had just witnessed. Maria stepped forward. Thank you, Mr. Reeves, she said with emotion in her voice. We needed this reminder. Keanu nodded gently. Then he turned back to the elderly man. Your table is ready now, he said kindly. Would you allow me to join you for dinner? The man's eyes filled with tears, but he nodded, smiling softly. As they sat together at a small corner table near the window, Keanu felt something shift deep inside. This night, a night that had begun with quiet rejection, was becoming something more powerful, something meaningful. But even as he sat there, sharing a quiet meal, Keanu knew that this was only the beginning, because tomorrow he would make sure that Haven's doors opened wider than ever before. And what he planned next would surprise everyone. The next morning arrived quietly, but with a sense of weight that hung in the air. Keanu Reeves sat alone at a small table near the window of Haven, looking out at the quiet street. The events of the night before played over and over in his mind. The dismissive voice of the doorman, the sorrow on the old man's face as he was turned away, and the painful realization that his dream, Haven, had already drifted from its purpose. This restaurant was never meant to be like all the others, yet somehow it had become exactly that. It wasn't about fine dining, expensive wines, or turning away people who didn't have reservations. It was supposed to be a home for all, a safe, warm space where anyone, no matter what they looked like or how much money they had, could sit down, enjoy a meal, and feel welcomed. As he sipped quietly on his coffee, Maria approached him slowly. Her expression was humble and thoughtful. She sat down across from him without a word at first, as if sensing that silence was needed before speaking. Finally, she broke the stillness. "Mr. Reeves," she said gently, "I want you to know. We all felt your words last night, deeply. You reminded us why we came here in the first place. This staff. We can do better." Keanu nodded softly, appreciating her sincerity. But he also knew that words weren't enough, not this time. Something bigger had to happen. Something that would change not just how the staff worked, but how everyone saw Haven from this day forward. He set down his coffee cup carefully and met her gaze. "Maria," he said slowly, "thank you, but I need to do something more. Something bold. This can't just be a quiet correction inside these walls. This is about showing people that kindness and respect are not things we say, they're things we do." Maria listened carefully, curiosity and hope flickering in her eyes. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but steady. "Today. We will open Haven's doors wider than ever before. No reservations required. No dress code, no expectations. Anyone who walks through these doors today. Will eat, no matter what." Maria blinked, stunned for a moment. "Anyone?" "Yes," Keanu said. "And not just that. Today, all meals will be free, completely free. But there's one condition: that they treat each other with respect while they are here. I want this restaurant to feel alive again. With joy, conversation, laughter, kindness. No one should feel out of place here, not for a single second." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "You really mean this?" Keanu smiled gently. "Yes, this is the Haven I dreamed about. Today, we remind everyone what that name truly means." Within an hour, the word began to spread quietly but quickly. It started with a few phone calls and whispers between neighbors. Soon, a small crowd began gathering outside. Some people were curious, others skeptical. A few clearly appeared down on their luck, men and women in worn jackets, parents holding their children's hands tightly, elderly neighbors who had lived in the shadows for too long. Keanu himself stood at the door as the clock struck noon. He opened it wide and greeted the first guest with a warm smile. "Welcome," he said gently. "Please, come in and enjoy." Inside, the atmosphere was changing already. Maria and her team worked quickly but with genuine warmth. The staff who had been stiff and formal before were now smiling, relaxed, laughing gently with the guests. It wasn't long before tables were full, but not with the wealthy influencers or celebrities who had filled them before. Instead, the room was filled with families who hadn't eaten at a restaurant in years, lonely elders who had no one at home, workers on their break who usually couldn't afford such a place. Keanu moved between the tables, shaking hands, sitting with guests, listening to their stories. He didn't speak much about himself. He just wanted to listen, to learn, and to feel what this place had become. But even as this beautiful scene unfolded inside, something darker was brewing outside. A small group of reporters had caught wind of what was happening. Cameras began gathering at the door. Questions flew quickly. Why is Keanu Reeves giving away free meals? Is this just a publicity stunt? How long will this last? Keanu stepped outside for a moment to speak with them. His tone remained gentle but firm. "This is not about publicity," he explained calmly. "This is about people. Last night, I watched someone get turned away from this place. Someone who deserved kindness, not rejection. Today, I am correcting that mistake. Today, Haven is open. For all. But one reporter, a sharp young woman with a skeptical look in her eyes, pressed harder. But surely you can't keep this up. Isn't this bad for business? Keanu smiled quietly. Kindness is never bad for business, he said softly. And Haven was never meant to be just a business. It was meant to be a place where people feel respected and valued. That starts today, and it will continue. Inside the restaurant, guests looked out the window, watching him speak. They felt seen, valued, many of them for the first time. In a long while later in the afternoon, as the crowd inside grew larger, the doorman from the night before quietly approached Keanu. His face was pale, his eyes lowered in shame. "Mr. Reeves," he said quietly, "I want to apologize for how I treated you and the elderly man last night. I didn't recognize you, and even if I had, it shouldn't have mattered." Keanu placed a gentle hand on the man's shoulder. "Thank you for saying that," he replied softly. "But this isn't about me being recognized or not. It's about treating everyone with respect, whether they own the place or they walk in from the street with nothing." The doorman nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. "I understand truly." Keanu smiled kindly. "Then help me today. Not as a guard at the door, but as a host. Stand with me and welcome people inside with kindness." The doorman straightened his back, emotion filling his face. "I would be honored," he said quietly. And so the day continued, with laughter, kindness, shared meals, and simple human connection. People who had never met before sat together, shared stories, and felt seen and cared for. By sunset, Haven was filled with warmth, not just from the lights and food, but from the spirit Keanu had worked so hard to create, a spirit that had been forgotten, but was now reborn. Keanu sat down once again at the corner table by the window, looking out at the city. He felt tired but deeply content. Today had been beautiful, imperfect, and absolutely real. But he knew this was just the beginning, because tomorrow, he planned to make a decision that would surprise everyone, a decision that would take Haven's mission even further and touch lives in ways no one expected. The next morning arrived gently, but Keanu Reeves was already awake before dawn. He sat at a small wooden table near the kitchen of Haven, a notebook open in front of him. Steam rose quietly from the cup of tea in his hand, but he barely touched it. His mind was filled with thoughts of what had happened the day before, and the feeling in the restaurant as people came together, strangers who laughed, shared stories, and sat side by side without judgment. It had been beautiful. But Keanu knew it couldn't just be a one-time gesture. It needed to become the heart of Haven itself. His fingers traced a line down the page where he had written ideas late into the night. No barriers, no reservations. Open to all. These words felt right, but there was one thing he kept turning over in his mind. How could this idea last? How could Haven stay open, welcome everyone, and continue to provide warmth, kindness, and meals without falling into chaos or running out of resources? As the sky outside lightened slowly, Maria appeared in the doorway. Her face was gentle but tired, her apron already tied around her waist, prepared for another busy day. She stepped quietly into the room, sitting across from him without saying a word at first. She knew when silence was needed. Finally, she spoke softly. "You're thinking about yesterday," she said simply. Keanu smiled faintly. "I am, and about today, and every day after." Maria tilted her head gently. "You want to do this again?" "Yes," Keanu said, "but not just today. I want Haven to truly be what we said it would be. A place where anyone can come and feel welcome, respected, fed, and cared for. Every single day." Maria looked down thoughtfully, then raised her eyes, her voice full of quiet honesty. It will not be easy. Keanu nodded. I know. The costs, the staff. How will we keep going? He leaned forward slightly, folding his hands. We will find a way. I believe people will help if they see what this place stands for. I believe kindness attracts kindness. We will invite everyone in, yes. But we will also invite those who can to give, not because they have to, but because they want to. Maria listened carefully, her eyes shining slightly. You really mean this? I do, Keanu said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. We will no longer be just a fine dining place for a few. We will become a haven for everyone. And today, I'm going to make sure the entire city knows. Just before noon, Keanu stepped outside the doors of Haven once more. A small crowd had already begun to gather, people who had heard whispers about what happened yesterday and who were curious to see if it was real. Many in the crowd looked hesitant, unsure whether they belonged there, unsure whether they would be turned away as they had so often been in other places. Keanu stepped forward gently, raising his voice just enough to be heard without shouting. Good afternoon, he began softly. Yesterday, something beautiful happened here. We opened the doors and welcomed everyone, without asking who they were, where they came from, or what they could pay. His eyes swept the faces in the crowd, some young, some old, some tired, some hopeful. But it wasn't perfect. He continued, we still have much to learn, and much to do. So today, I want you to know that Haven is not just doing this for a day or a week. This is the beginning of a new chapter. From this day forward, Haven will be open to all, no reservations. No dress code, no barriers. Anyone who needs a meal is welcome here. The crowd murmured softly, a mixture of surprise and emotion rising in the air. And for those who can afford it, Keanu added gently, we ask only that you give what you can. Not just money, but kindness, respect, and compassion for everyone who sits beside you. There was silence at first. Then, one small child clapped, followed by their mother. Then a man near the back. And soon the entire crowd was applauding. Not for celebrity, but for what Haven was becoming. As guests began to enter, something remarkable happened. People who could afford a meal gave generously, not because they were forced to, but because they wanted to be part of this spirit. Others who could not afford anything were welcomed warmly, without question or hesitation. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was alive again, but in a way it had never been before. People from every background shared tables, smiled, listened to each other's stories. A man in a business suit sat beside an elderly woman who lived alone and hadn't eaten at a restaurant in years. A group of young workers, tired from their shifts, shared a meal with a family who had recently lost their home. Laughter and conversation filled every corner. Keanu moved gently between the tables, stopping often, listening carefully. He spoke softly to a single mother who had been struggling to feed her children, to a lonely veteran who felt forgotten, to young artists who couldn't afford fine dining but came to experience a place that felt alive and real. But in one corner of the room, something unexpected happened that sent a ripple through the crowd. The skeptical reporter from the day before had returned, her camera in hand, but this time, she wasn't filming. She sat quietly at a table alone, watching everything unfold. After a while, Keanu approached her gently and sat down across from her. You're back, he said softly. She nodded slowly, setting her camera aside. I had to see if it was real. Keanu smiled kindly. And what do you think? The reporter hesitated for a long moment before answering, her voice quieter than before. I think I may have been wrong. This is real, and it's beautiful. She looked down at the table before continuing. I came yesterday ready to find flaws, ready to call this a publicity stunt. But sitting here today, I feel something different. I feel peace. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his voice filled with warmth. That's all I ever wanted. For people to feel welcome, respected, and cared for." The reporter nodded slowly, emotion clear on her face. "I can see that now." The afternoon passed quickly, but no one rushed to leave. The restaurant felt more like a family gathering than a business. People stayed to talk, to listen, and to share. Some guests who had come with money offered to help wash dishes or sweep the floor, small acts of gratitude for what they had experienced. As the sun set gently over the city, Haven felt like it had finally become what Keanu always dreamed. It would be not just a restaurant, but a symbol of kindness, humility, and human connection. But as Keanu sat quietly at the window once more, looking out at the city lights, he knew that this mission would not be without challenges. Tomorrow would bring new questions, more doubt from outsiders, and more pressure from those who didn't understand. And yet, in his heart, he felt ready, because this was no longer about him. This was about all the people who sat at these tables, and all the people still out there, waiting to be welcomed. The morning sun slipped gently through the windows of Haven, casting soft golden light across the wooden floors and polished tables. But even before the restaurant officially opened its doors, there was already a quiet hum of activity. The staff moved carefully through the space, preparing for what they now understood was more than just a busy day. It was a new chapter in Haven's life. Keanu Reeves stood at the back of the dining room, watching everything unfold. His heart felt full but heavy at the same time. What had begun as a simple idea, a place where everyone could feel welcome, was now becoming something far larger than he had ever imagined. He could feel it in the air, the expectations, the hope, and the fragile thread of trust that connected every person who crossed Haven's threshold. He also knew that not everyone believed in this dream. Outside, a different kind of crowd was beginning to gather. Journalists, photographers, social media influencers, all curious, some skeptical, a few openly critical. They whispered questions among themselves, their cameras ready. Could a place like Haven really survive this way? Could kindness truly keep the doors open? As he observed them through the window, Maria appeared quietly beside him. Her expression was calm, but her eyes reflected concern. "Keanu," she said softly, "the kitchen staff. They're nervous. They've never served this many people, especially without a reservation list or a set plan and suppliers. Some are starting to ask questions. We're stretching thin already." Keanu nodded slowly. He felt the weight of every word she spoke. "I know, Maria," he said gently. "This is going to test all of us. But I believe that the heart of Haven is stronger than any menu or business plan." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Just one day at a time. That's all we can do." As noon approached, he stepped outside once again. A long line had formed down the block, people of every background, waiting quietly but hopefully. Some looked as though they hadn't stepped inside a restaurant in years. Others appeared shy, unsure if they truly belonged. But Keanu smiled warmly at them all, greeting each person not with celebrity distance, but with genuine kindness. When the doors opened, the line began to move. People entered slowly at first, but soon the dining room filled with the soft hum of voices, laughter, and shared stories. Strangers sat together, old friends reunited, and parents introduced their children to neighbors they'd never met before. But deep within this beautiful scene, another quiet test was beginning to unfold. A man entered the restaurant, well-dressed and clearly wealthy. He carried himself with confidence, but his expression was cold, almost calculating. He sat at a table near the center of the room and observed everything carefully. When Maria approached him gently, he waved her off. "Tell Keanu I wish to speak with him directly," the man said sharply. Maria hesitated, but then nodded and went to find Keanu. When Keanu approached the table, the man leaned forward slightly, his tone polite but firm. "Mr. Reeves," he began, "my name is Elliot. I'm an investor, And I've heard much about what you're doing here. Keanu nodded calmly, his voice gentle. Good afternoon, Elliot. I hope you feel welcome here today. Elliot smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in it. That's just it, isn't it? You are creating a wonderful atmosphere. But tell me, Keanu, how long do you think this can last? Giving away meals? Letting anyone walk in? This is not sustainable. Sooner or later, this will fall apart. Kindness doesn't pay the bills. Keanu listened carefully, letting the words sink in before replying. He folded his hands on the table, his voice steady but full of quiet strength. Elliot, Haven was never about profit first. It was about people, and yes, I know there will be challenges. I know this won't be easy, but that's the point. It shouldn't be easy to create something that truly welcomes everyone. It takes effort, patience, belief. Elliot tilted his head slightly, a hint of curiosity in his expression now. Belief won't pay your staff or your suppliers. Keanu smiled gently. No, but respect will. Kindness will. People who believe in what this place stands for will help. They already are. Yesterday, guests who could afford it gave generously. Some even offered to volunteer their time, to clean, to serve, to cook. Elliot said nothing for a long moment, studying Keanu's face as if searching for a weakness, a doubt, a hesitation. But there was none. Finally, Elliot leaned back in his chair, nodding slowly. You're serious about this, aren't you? I am, Keanu said softly. And you're welcome to stay for lunch. Elliot chuckled quietly, shaking his head. Maybe I will. As Keanu stood and moved gently through the restaurant, he felt a deeper sense of resolve settle inside him. He knew Elliot wasn't wrong to ask those questions. Many people would wonder the same. But Keanu also knew that the true value of Haven could not be measured in profit margins alone. It would be measured in the connections formed at these tables, in the dignity restored to those who felt invisible, in the kindness that flowed between strangers. Hours passed, but no one rushed to leave. People stayed not just to eat but to talk, to listen, to feel part of something real. Then, just as the afternoon light began to soften into evening, another unexpected moment unfolded. The skeptical reporter from the day before, the one who had sat quietly observing everything, rose from her table. This time, she walked to the front of the room and cleared her throat gently. The entire dining room fell quiet. Excuse me, she said softly, her voice shaking slightly with emotion. I'm a reporter. I came here at first because I doubted this place, because I doubted Keanu's intentions. But what I've seen over the past 2 days, it has changed something inside me. She paused, taking a breath. I want you all to know that I won't be writing a story about celebrity or publicity. I will be writing about what it means to create a space where everyone is welcome, truly welcome. And I hope that other places learn from Haven. A soft ripple of applause began, then grew louder, filling the room. Keanu watched quietly from a corner, his eyes misting slightly, but his heart steady. Haven was becoming what it was always meant to be, a home for everyone. But deep down, he knew this was still just the beginning. Tomorrow, he planned to take an even bolder step, a step that would surprise the entire city and show them that kindness was more powerful than anyone had imagined. Morning light crept gently across the city, but inside Haven, there was already a quiet energy, almost like the calm before a storm. The staff moved carefully through the restaurant, their faces a mixture of hope, excitement, and nervousness. Yesterday had been extraordinary. Haven had transformed from a quiet fine dining space into a living symbol of respect, humility, kindness, and inclusion. But today was different. Keanu Reeves stood alone near the large front windows, his reflection blurred slightly by the early morning fog. In his hand was a simple sheet of paper, no grand announcement, no flashy promotion, just a short, heartfelt message. This was the moment he had been preparing for silently over the past few days. He knew the eyes of the city were on Haven now. Reporters, skeptics, business owners, influencers, all watching to see whether this place could really sustain what it had promised. Kindness, they said, was a beautiful idea. But it couldn't run a business. Not in a city like this. Keanu smiled softly as he remembered those words. What they didn't understand was that Haven was no longer just a business. It had become something else, something more powerful, more fragile, and more precious. It had become a place where people came not just to eat, but to feel seen, respected, and cared for. He turned toward Maria, who stood quietly nearby, waiting. "Today's the day," he said gently. "Are you ready?" She asked. Keanu's single quotes as smile was quiet, but full of determination. "I don't know," he admitted honestly, "but it doesn't matter. This is the right thing to do." He walked outside slowly, stepping up onto a small wooden crate just beyond the front door. A crowd was already gathering, some familiar faces, who had come to eat in Haven over the past days, others who had heard about what was happening and wanted to see it for themselves. There were families, elderly neighbors, workers on their lunch break, and people who clearly lived on the streets, but now felt comfortable enough to stand proudly in front of this place. Reporters lined the sidewalk too, cameras ready, microphones pointed at Keanu as soon as he appeared. He raised his hand gently, asking for quiet, and the crowd fell still. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice calm but carrying enough strength for all to hear. "For the past few days, we have opened Haven's doors to everyone. No reservations, no restrictions, no expectations. We've shared meals, laughter, and stories, and we've built something beautiful together." His eyes scanned the faces before him, seeing hope, curiosity, even doubt in some. "But I want you all to know, this is not a temporary gesture. This is not a charity stunt or a short-term promotion. This is who we are now. From this day forward, Haven will remain open to everyone, every single day. If you need a meal, you are welcome here. If you want to give, you can give. If you want to volunteer, you can help. But no one will ever be turned away again." A soft murmur moved through the crowd. Surprise, amazement, disbelief. Keanu took a breath, continuing gently. "But I am also announcing something more today. Something I've been planning quietly since the very beginning." He held up the simple sheet of paper in his hand. "Today, I am donating Haven to the people of this city." The words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, almost too heavy and surprising to sink in immediately. "This restaurant is no longer mine," he said calmly. "It belongs to all of you now. The staff, the guests, the volunteers, the people who walk through these doors. Haven will be managed by a community trust, a group of people who believe in its mission and who will work together to ensure it stays true to its purpose." For a moment, the crowd was completely silent. Even the reporters held their breath. Then slowly, applause began, soft at first, then louder, until it filled the street with warmth. Inside the restaurant, Maria wiped a tear from her eye. She had suspected that Keanu was planning something bold. But this was far beyond what she had imagined. Keanu stepped down from the crate, shaking hands, embracing guests, listening carefully as people spoke quietly to him. An elderly man who had come the very first day, the one turned away by the doorman, approached Keanu gently, his eyes glistening. "You kept your promise," he said softly. Keanu smiled. "This place was always meant for you, for all of us." The doorman from that same night stood nearby as well, his face filled with humility. He hadn't left Haven since that day, working not as a guard anymore, but as a host, welcoming each guest with sincerity and warmth. Later that afternoon, inside the restaurant, people continued to fill every table. Some came for food. Others came simply to sit, talk, and share in the atmosphere of kindness and respect. Families sat next to strangers, Artists sketched quietly in notebooks. An elderly couple shared their life story with two young travelers who had just arrived in the city. Keanu moved gently through the crowd. But he was no longer the owner. He was simply part of the community now. Elliot, the investor who had questioned him so sharply just the day before, returned as well. This time he didn't come with cold words or criticism. He sat quietly at a table, watching everything unfold. After a while, he approached Keanu, his voice quiet and thoughtful. "I didn't believe this could work," Elliot admitted. "But now, I see something different. I see people, not transactions." Keanu smiled kindly. "Thank you for coming back, Elliot." Elliot nodded. "I'd like to help if you'll let me." Keanu placed a hand gently on Elliot's shoulder. "Everyone is welcome at Haven, whether they come to eat, help, or learn." As night fell gently over the city, the warm glow from Haven's windows shone like a beacon, a reminder that respect, humility, resilience, and kindness could truly change lives. But deep down, Keanu knew that even as Haven was now in the hands of the people, there would still be challenges ahead. Critics would return, doubts would rise. But he also knew that something real had been planted here, a seed of hope that could not easily be undone. The first rays of sunlight stretched across the quiet street outside Haven, and for a brief, peaceful moment, everything seemed still. But inside the restaurant, the atmosphere was filled with a different kind of energy, a quiet but undeniable sense that today would matter even more than any day before. The community trust was now in place. Haven no longer belonged to Keanu Reeves. It belonged to the people. But the transition would not be easy. The world outside had taken notice. Local news had covered the story of Haven's transformation. National media had followed. And now some critics were speaking louder. Some said this was naive, that such an open-door policy would collapse, that people would take advantage of it, that without strict control, it would descend into chaos. Others suggested Haven was only surviving because of the fame of its former owner. Whispers of doubt began to creep into the conversations around the city. It was a delicate time, the kind of moment that could make or break everything they had built. Keanu sat quietly at one of the tables near the window. He wasn't the owner anymore, but he couldn't help feeling connected to the soul of this place. Haven was his dream, but now it was also everyone else's, and he knew this meant it had to weather storms of skepticism, temptation, and fear. Maria joined him, placing a cup of tea gently on the table. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were steady. "There's talk going around," she said softly. "Some people are saying this can't last. Some of the suppliers are getting nervous. Some staff are unsure whether they'll still have jobs in a few weeks." Keanu nodded slowly. "I know," he replied gently. "It was never going to be easy." Maria hesitated. "Do you think, maybe, we should scale back, return to reservations, reduce the number of free meals?" Keanu looked out the window for a long moment, watching a small group gather quietly outside. A mother with two children, a man carrying a guitar case, an elderly woman holding a single flower. They didn't look like critics. They looked like people hoping for a place to sit, to eat, to be welcomed. He turned back to Maria. "No," he said firmly, but kindly. "If we take one step back, we'll lose what this place has become. This is when it matters most, when it's hard." She smiled softly, understanding at last. "You're right," she whispered. As noon approached, a small crowd began to form outside. But this time, there was a different tension in the air. Some faces in the crowd didn't look like they had come to eat or share a meal. A few had come simply to watch, to see whether Haven would falter. There were reporters, skeptics, even local officials, standing with folded arms and curious eyes. Inside, the staff worked quickly but carefully. The kitchen was a symphony of movement, every dish prepared with care, even under the weight of expectation. Volunteers who had appeared over the past few days now worked alongside the staff as equals, filling water glasses, serving plates, sweeping floors. Keanu remained near the door, welcoming each guest himself. Some entered shyly, others gratefully, a few skeptically, but he greeted each one with a smile and a simple phrase, "Welcome, we're glad you're here." But then, as the dining room filled, a small disruption occurred. A man who had been waiting outside, scruffy, loud, clearly drunk, stumbled inside. His voice rose quickly, interrupting the gentle hum of conversation. "This place gives out free food?" he slurred loudly. "I want it now." For a moment, the room fell silent. Some guests turned their heads, unsure what would happen next. A few reporters raised their cameras, ready to capture the moment Haven fell apart. But Keanu stepped forward calmly, his voice soft but steady. "You're welcome here," he said gently, meeting the man's gaze directly. "But please, sit down and allow us to serve you like everyone else." The man hesitated. His posture softened slightly, but the anger in his voice still flickered. "Why should you care?" he mumbled. "No one cares about me." Keanu didn't flinch. "We care," he said quietly. "This place is for everyone. That includes you." He motioned gently toward an empty seat at a table near the window. "Please, join us." The man looked around slowly, confusion and emotion flickering across his face. Finally, he lowered his head and walked slowly to the seat. A volunteer approached quietly and poured him a glass of water. The tension in the room dissolved almost instantly, replaced by warmth, respect, and quiet relief. Guests returned to their meals and conversations, but many stole glances toward Keanu, silent gratitude in their eyes. Outside, some reporters lowered their cameras. A few even smiled faintly. Elliot, the investor who had doubted Haven just days before, sat nearby. He leaned over to Keanu and spoke softly. "That could have gone differently," he admitted. "Most places would have called security." Keanu smiled gently. "Most places aren't Haven," he replied. As the afternoon light softened into early evening, something remarkable happened. Guests who had eaten their meals began rising from their tables, not to leave, but to help. Some cleared dishes. Others offered to sweep floors, wipe tables, or refill water glasses. A young musician pulled out his guitar and began to play quietly in the corner, filling the room with soft, beautiful melodies. The spirit of Haven was no longer being carried by Keanu alone. It was alive in every person who stepped through the door. Maria stood nearby, tears quietly slipping down her cheeks. She whispered to herself, This is what we always hoped for." Keanu sat back down at his usual table near the window, watching everything unfold with a deep sense of peace. The critics would continue to ask questions. There would be more challenges ahead, financial strains, busy days, and uncertain times. But Haven had found its heart again. And that heart beat strongly, because Haven was no longer just a restaurant. It was a reminder that kindness, respect, humility, and resilience could change a place. And maybe, just maybe, could change a city. As night fell and the final guests prepared to leave, one of the children who had eaten with their family earlier in the day ran back inside quietly and hugged Keanu's arm. "Thank you," the child whispered. Softly. Keanu smiled, his eyes misting again. "You're always welcome here," he said gently. And as the lights dimmed and the doors closed for the night, he knew that Haven's story was far from over. This was just the beginning.